So it's a Sunday morning, and two neighbors come out and say to me, "Did you hear about the shooting last night? Will Smith was murdered last night in the city of New Orleans."
There's a male down with about 6 gunshot wounds to the chest.
Oh, my God.
Let's turn now to the growing mystery surrounding the shooting death of a former NFL star. Police have charged a man with second-degree murder for allegedly gunning down former New Orleans Saints player Will Smith.
He's one of the best Saints ever. He gave them a Super Bowl. He's a beloved son of New Orleans.
Make no mistake about it, we absolutely do not tolerate this type of behavior on the streets of New Orleans, and we will build a strong case for the district attorney to prosecute Cardell Hayes to the fullest extent of the law.
It's interesting, right? Like, sports and race have always been an intersectional point in American history. Black New Orleans, 7th Ward, 9th Ward, Mid-City, Treme, they sided with Cardell. Everybody else, politicians, power brokers, Drew Brees, Sean Payton, they didn't care what Cardell Hayes was or is. They just knew one of their own got killed.
Five years ago, this team played its entire season on the road. It didn't have a home field. The Superdome had been ruined by Hurricane Katrina. Back then, people didn't even know if the team was coming back. People didn't know if the city was coming back. Not only did the team come back, it took its city's hands and helped its city back on its feet. Congratulations to all of you. New Orleans Saints, 2009 Super Bowl champions. Congratulations.
Where your camera at? Come here, let me show you something. Need some help? Read that. That's the number one rule. Rules of the Barber D. Number one rule. No disrespect in the New Orleans Saints. Look at the second rule. No weapons. You gotta realize something, the Saints been here way before Sean Payton, way before Will Smith. The symbol of the Saints represents the city.
So this is the 2005 Saints team photo. There's a very young, spry Lance Morph, rookie season. And then if we zoom up here, we see Will. And Will, he looked exactly the same. Kind of weird. I guess he was one of those guys that was young that looked older. He was probably 20 or 21. I was probably 19. He was put in a situation where he's very, very blessed and fortunate, being a first-round pick and a Pro Bowl guy. And you know, he made a lot of money, but he understood that it was just as important to give back to his community and touch and help as many people and families as he could. And you know, that's something that he did regularly.
To many of us, Will Smith was a hero, and he gave back in a number of ways to some of the less privileged children of this community, and he was just overall a very good person and a decent man. Certainly, we believed it was a second-degree murder. We believed it was a cold-blooded killing. I certainly believe that this entire event could have been avoided.
Only two people know the truth of what happened that night in New Orleans. Cardell Hayes and Will Smith.
If I'm not mistaken, Cardell Hayes is in a Hummer. Will Smith is in a Mercedes. Will Smith is traveling behind Cardell Hayes' vehicle. Cardell Hayes' vehicle comes to a stop in traffic.
Will Smith bangs into the back of Cardell Hayes' car.
And then he goes around Cardell Hayes' vehicle and travels a block or two further down the street. He then is stopped again in traffic. Cardell Hayes, in his Hummer, smashes into the back of Will Smith's Mercedes.
At that point, a few folks get out of the car. There's cussing involved. The third car they bump into also in front. Members of Will Smith's party's car are ready to fight.
Smith gets out of his car, and he gets out of his car for all intents and purposes. He's angry and he's upset. Cardell Hayes gets out of his car, and he's armed with a weapon. There is an exchange of words between the two men. Will Smith's wife, Raquel, goes in to try to essentially separate the men. She's not successful in doing that. Will Smith sees Hayes with the gun and then turns to go back to his vehicle.
When we arrived, we located Mr. Smith partially inside of his vehicle, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds to his body. He was later pronounced dead on the scene. We also found his wife, who had been shot to the right leg. She was taken to the hospital where she was treated for non-life-threatening injuries.
It was our theory of the case that the first bullet struck Raquel Smith in the knee. The second bullet strikes Will Smith on the left side of his chest. We then believe, as Will Smith is going into his vehicle, Cardell Hayes is pursuing him and fires 7 more times into the back of Will Smith.
Will Smith was shot a total of 8 times. Cardell Hayes did not miss once. And, you know, he wasn't acting in self-defense. He was acting to kill.
Cardell Hayes remained on the scene. He was taken into custody that evening by the police.
That next morning, his face was on every newspaper in America. My phone buzzed, and I saw all these alerts that Will Smith had gotten killed in New Orleans. I called my editor the next day, Elena Bergeron. She's from New Orleans. And I said, I don't know what this case is. I don't know anything about this case yet, but I feel like we should be there.
Will Smith! I said rest in peace! Will Smith! I said stop the violence! Stop the violence! Stop the violence! Stop the violence!
I couldn't stop crying. I couldn't believe that it was real.
Yeah, I mean, the city was in shock, you know, because, you know, the players are like heroes. You know, they're like gods to people in New Orleans.
He was a first-class guy.
Man, when I first saw it that morning, my instinct, when I saw it, the first thing I saw was Will Smith, no lie. First thing I saw, I said, damn, even me, I gotta be guilty, because I was like, damn, that's fucked up. Look how they did Will.
Football Smith was like the football player. I said, oh, that's cool. And it was like, Uncle Road Rage.
Right.
Like,
Then I saw who it was, and I said, hey, get the fuck out of here. Something else up. That was my first thing, because I know that man.
I thought it was Will Smith, the actor. I told the chick, man, you tripping. We was sitting right here. I said, hey, man, nobody shooting no fucking Will Smith. That's what we say, but we didn't know it was Will Smith, the football player, until 6 that morning. Then the next page I got after that was Bear's picture. I damn near shit on it.
And I was like, no way.
Then I saw the picture. The first thing I said, the person who told me that, I texted him and said, I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but whatever happened, they had to make that dude do that.
Right.
That was the first thing I said, because I was like, I know he wouldn't have did that.
It's bad enough that it happened, but then when you kind of learn about the circumstances and how it kind of came about, it should have been avoided for sure.
You said you were in his car together. Where were you guys coming from?
We was coming from a small party. Yeah, this right here is one of the better parts of the city. Right here is the intersection where it all transpired at. Everything kind of took place right here on this intersection. First off, you gotta try to place yourself in the shoes of Mr. Hayes, somebody who's minding their business, driving down the street.
I think we had three basic problems with our case. I think three hurdles we had to overcome. The first issue was the fact that Will Smith did, in fact, bump into the back of Cardell Hayes' vehicle.
You getting rear-ended, turn from you doing the correct thing, pulling over to, you know, a person trying to flee the scene of an accident. Like, neither one of us was mad because we was both in good spirits, you know what I'm saying? But we was like, are they really trying to run? Like, where they trying to go? Like, it's people walking all down the sidewalks, it's red lights, it's traffic, like, where they trying to go?
The second issue we had to overcome was that Will Smith had a blood alcohol content of 0.24, which is essentially 3 times the legal limit for someone driving while intoxicated in the state of Louisiana.
Will Smith cursing and doing whatever he's doing. You know, he come run down there at Cardell, basically cursing, swinging at him, trying to fight him.
Cardell Hayes is trying to defuse the situation. Will Smith's wife is trying to defuse the situation. Will Smith is allegedly actively swinging at Cardell Hayes.
The third obstacle we had to overcome was that Will Smith got out of his car and he was upset.
And then, next thing you know, boom, 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 boom.
Respond for an adult female knee injury secondary to a fall at Tinker Toys.
Something doesn't feel right about this case. A 6'6", round-headed, thick beard, waving dreads, black man given to the national media as somebody who killed a beloved man who was literally a saint. That already bodes a racial dynamic where you think somebody's going to be at fault, and it might not be the right person.
He's a clown. He's a clown. Look at that face. Look at that face.
This is my dad.
It's just like you.
Thank you.
And Cardell was 4. And they have it in common. They both love Ninja Turtles. I attended every game Cardell ever played. He was good. He was real good. And I really didn't like him playing football because I didn't want him to get hurt, but he loved the sport.
We started off in the trenches, you know, watching each other back, you know, making sure nobody get outside of me and nobody get past him. And that relationship that we built playing alongside each other in the trenches, it blossomed into a whole brotherhood. I watched him elevate himself, you know, go to school, become an entrepreneur, you know, start up a business. You know, I watched him do all that, you know, with the dreams and hopes of one day being able to take care of his mama, be able to take care of his family how he see fit.
You gonna hit somebody. 1, 2, 3, jump.
Look, pay attention to what you're doing, TJ. You want me to paint your face?
Football, 2005 from Warren Easton. Some of them I can't tell what year because the decal is gone. This one also was for academics. He had a lot more for different basketball and football and perfect attendance, good behavior, honor roll. Some of them didn't make it. They survived Hurricane Katrina. They're damaged, but I was still able to clean them up a little to display them. He had a full scholarship, but after Katrina happened, He just didn't want to be that far away from us. Cardell really, he stepped up as a young man. He had to grow up a little faster. He chose family over football.
Cardell was this big dude, you know what I mean? Like, he played line, like, he was very good at it, you know? By the end of 2004, a bunch of different scouting websites said he was a top 50 prospect in Louisiana. And then, it's the tale of so many lives in New Orleans, Katrina hit. 1,500 people died. Cardell did what he had to do. He went to work. He delayed his football dreams.
I woke up and my son's face was being plastered all over. He just did not deserve to be plastered all over the TV screen, called the murderer and a monster, and his baby boy hearing all of that. He was asking every day, where my daddy at? Why my daddy not here? You know, he was starting to feel abandoned by his father, and I didn't want him to feel that way. So, you know, we talked with his mom, and his mama sit him down and told him, you know, what had happened and where his daddy was.
To see his dignity, to see his, you know, respect and all that get taken away from him, you know, it's really hard.
Panama City.
All right, so I heard 9 cats. I was right behind you guys. I was wondering who. I know he got shot. He pulled the gun first.
He went for a gun first. Hold on. Look, chill out. All right. Well, you know, my first initial thought was, who got shot? I didn't even know nobody went for a gun. He take his gun, empty it out, make sure it's, you know, whatever, in a safe place.
Leave that shit right there, bro. Yeah, it's smart.
If Cardell was the one who was out of his mind, why would people walk up to him and want to talk to him? And he was telling people, call the police, make sure y'all tell them everything y'all saw. He stayed and waited, cooperated with the police. But when they finally showed up, you know, first thing, you know, put your hands up, guns drawn.
They thought originally Kevin O'Neill, the person on the other side of the car, killed Will Smith. Cardell Hayes said, no, this is my crime, I did this. Once he finds out it's Will Smith, a man who he has literally watched hours of tape on to try to become a better defensive lineman, he crumbles. He says, my life is over.
Make no mistake about it, we absolutely do not tolerate this type of behavior on the streets of New Orleans, and we will build a strong case for the district attorney to prosecute Cardell Hayes to the fullest extent of the law.
Here it is, it's just the next morning. You don't even know nothing about the crime scene, the body's still in the morgue, but you got in front of the cameras and talked about prosecuting this man to the fullest extent of the law. So you basically made him guilty in the eyes of public opinion from day one.
My client secured a witness who was about to leave the scene, and my client waited for law enforcement to arrive. Now tell me if that's the behavior that's consistent with someone who's an animal out here looking for blood.
From my perspective, self-defense was pretty clear. Every single witness, with the exception of the Smith party, obviously, in fact said that Mr. Smith was the aggressor. Cardell was very restrained. Cardell was very calm. It wasn't until Mr. Smith began to go towards his truck that my client acted in self-defense.
The first interaction between the Mercedes wagon that was being driven by Will Smith with his wife in the front seat and Richard Hernandez and his wife, Rebecca Dooley, seated in the back seat, was in front of Juan's Flying Burrito on Magazine Street, where Will Smith made contact, I think the evidence showed, with the rear of Cardell Hayes' Hummer.
That night, we really, basically got ganged up on. It's hard to wrap your mind around the fact that, you know, These people basically got away with everything they did wrong that night. You had people everywhere, so it's hard to tell where every moving part came from. But for sure, you had Will Smith, Hernandez, and Doolin. They were the three who left and walked a whole vehicle length, maybe 2 vehicle lengths, to our vehicle. I'm trying not to turn my back on these 2 guys on this side of me, because one of them already took his shirt off and made it clear that he wants to fight.
We knew that the jury was gonna have a problem with Richard Hernandez. There were a lot of things that Richard did on the scene that, you know, were not gonna be liked by any jury in any jurisdiction, including this one. The fact that Richard, you know, had to testify that after this took place, he immediately got in a cab and left the scene is something that we were gonna have to deal with. But the bottom line was that we weren't dealing with Richard Hernandez, we were dealing with the murder of Will Smith. And if Will Smith is gonna be shot 7 times in the back, then the focus needs to be on what did Will Smith do that night, and did he deserve to be shot 7 times in the back?
In my opinion, there's no doubt that Richard Hernandez was a terrible witness. And why was he a terrible witness? Because he had horrible facts. He was the person who ripped his shirt off. He was the person who was running around like a crazy man. He was the one who was egging everybody on, more particularly egging Will Smith on.
Self-defense is clearly a law that's on the books, justifiable homicide, stand your ground. But in practice, it's only afforded to a small group of people.
To be a justifiable homicide under Louisiana law, the defendant has to reasonably believe that he is in imminent danger of being killed or receiving great bodily harm, and that it is necessary for him to kill that person to remove himself from that danger.
Will Smith, he was 3 times the legal drinking limit when he was killed that night and when he got behind a wheel. He committed a crime before he even met Cardell Hayes.
Thing is, he was following a criminal at that moment. But somebody had already hit him, and he was following him, trying to give the police the description of a criminal that just had committed a criminal act upon him. Before shooting, before anything, Will Smith was a drunk driver that ran from an accident. Point blank, period. He just hit somebody. He a drunk driver, he ran. Now let's say the story stopped right here. And then we find out it's Will Smith. In this fucking city, is Will Smith ass going to jail?
No. The minute they start reporting that it was him that got shot, the whole narrative of the story was he was in the right and the person that did it was in the wrong. The only reason why it matters so much to us, to the people in this room, because we know the guy who did it.
Y'all assassinating this man character on the other hand, but, you know, this man character can't be brought up.
He was a domestic abuser. He pulled his wife out of a Lafayette, Louisiana club by her hair at a ridiculous time of night. He was a defensive lineman, so he was a man who was paid to injure people.
You ain't just talking about anybody who's not totally capable of being violent, being aggressive, you know? Y'all gave this man $90 million to do just that, be violent and be aggressive.
Every corner you turn in this case, it was something that was fabricated, or it was something that was changed, or it was something that was left out, or it was something that was taken out. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, you're talking about somebody's life, man. Like, it's unfortunate what happened to Will Smith and with his family and everything out there doing, but at the end of the day, it's wrong what Cardell and his family going through.
Did Mr. Smith ever threaten to go get his gun inside the car?
I am not aware of any threats by Mr. Smith to go get a gun.
But on Tuesday, police confirmed they discovered a fully loaded gun in Smith's car, raising a number of questions, including why it took investigators more than 2 days to find it. Police say they needed time to methodically execute a search warrant.
It'd be safe to say this wasn't the NOPD's finest moment. There was an allegation about a former police officer, William Caravello, possibly removing a firearm from the scene.
Billy Caravello is a retired NOPD captain. He's a very dear friend, or was a very dear friend, of Will Smith and Raquel Smith. The defense would have you believe that he was the fix-it guy. He was the guy that if you got in a jam, you call Billy Caravello and he would fix everything for you. There was a lot of talk in the community, oh, well, Cardell Hayes is going to be acquitted because there's this dirty cop. And there's these shenanigans that went on in the NOPD. You know how the NOPD is. If you listen to John Fuller early on in the case, and I've made this mistake myself, you get married to a particular position and then you can't get out of it. I think he got married to the position that Billy Saravolo was this villain who was walking around with his badge out and he took a gun and hit it or did whatever he did to the contrary because of the tactical decision that was made in the defense of the case. Billy Saravolo went from villain to victim.
I only testified that one day. I was up there longer than anybody who testified throughout the whole trial. I said to myself, I'm gonna make sure these people feel me. I'm gonna make sure these people know exactly who I am and know that, you know, you can't fool everybody. Everybody is not blind. You know, we all not ignorant. It was like I was getting ready to come out here. You know, like that was the feel. That was my approach. You know, it was like, it's game time.
It's important to point out that Kevin O'Neill was called on direct examination by the state as a preemptive strike, I would suggest.
What we wanted to use Kevin O'Neill for was to establish that even the defendant's best friend is going to come into court in front of the jury and swear that he never saw Will Smith with a gun in his hand, and he certainly didn't see Will Smith fire that weapon at anybody, including his wife.
When I watched him testify in answering questions presented by the state, I thought he was a terrible witness. He was terribly detrimental to Cardell Hayes. You would think that everything he would offer would be beneficial to Cardell Hayes because this is good buddy, he's in the car, he's there. I tweeted out, I said, this is a disaster, it's a horrible witness. You can see that the defense is really falling apart.
You know, they didn't give my child the benefit of the doubt. They didn't wait for the information to come out before he was just this monster. And if they knew the young man that I know, they would have known that wasn't the truth. But they didn't give him a chance to defend himself. That was the last flowers my child gave me before all of this happened. And I'm gonna hold on to those flowers until he come home. My grandbaby tell me all the time, "Mimi, you have to water the flowers because they're dying." I say, I know, I said, but I'm gonna keep them. And so he gets up there and he waters the flowers in hope that they will come back alive.
I need to hear from Cardell Hayes. I need to hear what was going through his mind.
It was something that he said, oh, I wish I would have let him kill me. When I heard he said that, that really took the soul out of me.
I mean, Cardell did an excellent job on the stand. He literally had multiple jurors crying when he was testifying.
If Cardell Hayes succeeded in doing anything, it was garnering some sympathy from the jury. He did testify about how he was, a father of a young child. He was able to get that out. He did come off as personable to the jury. I think that certainly helped him.
I really believe, seeing the demeanor of Cardell Hayes, that Cardell Hayes really, really, really believed that he had no other option.
Black guy, bro. This shit crazy, bro. Just be cool. I know, but it's just a bad thing. I kept asking him. Back up. Get up.
The New Orleans Saints players came all in the courtroom, and yeah, I don't know anything about Mr. Smith. I don't know anything good or bad about him, but they portrayed him as this hero. I think they played on the emotions of the jurors, you know, by bringing all of these NFL players into the courtroom, front and center, eye to eye with them.
I don't believe the Saints in any way adversely influenced the jury to come back with a guilty verdict. I think they were there because they lost one of their own.
You have former Saints players, current Saints players, and a coach staring at you, maybe 10 feet away from you.
You have 4 companies that run this whole damn city. This whole city. Energy, Cox Cable, the Saints. You understand?
Right.
That's crazy.
Ain't no accountability for.
At the end of the closing remarks, the prosecutor said, we have to do this for New Orleans. Like if taking my son off the streets was gonna make New Orleans safer.
It boils down to the argument. You essentially had a defendant who took the stand, Cardell Hayes, and said, this happened in self-defense. Then on the other side, we had the Smith family and our evidence, which said this was not a self-defense act. This was something where he was never in fear of losing his life, such that he had to take the life of Will Smith.
You have juries that do strange things when they're sequestered. When the judge ordered sequestration, you say, well, what does sequestration mean? Sequestration means that the jury can't go home. The jury's not allowed to look at the media, to read the newspaper, and that goes all back to the publicity surrounding the trial. They're in some hotel somewhere. They want to go home. I told everybody I talked to, this jury's coming back tonight.
I was preparing myself for the worst, but I just kept telling myself, man, he about to come home. They about to let him out. You know, I'm gonna pull up on him. You know, he gonna come up out of there. You know, he gonna hop in the truck and we gonna ride off into the sunlight, you know, and man, unfortunately, that ain't how it went. That ain't how it went.
Look, I might disagree personally with that particular verdict. I believed it was a second-degree murder. If we didn't believe that, we would not have indicted him for the second-degree murder. But I certainly respect the time and the effort that the jury gave to that particular case and that verdict and the decision that they rendered.
They delivered the verdict in 5 hours on a Sunday, right before Sunday Night Football started.
The judge, who I thought was incredibly fair throughout the entire proceedings, sentenced him to 25 years. What does that say? I think it says that Cardell Hayes was a good witness. I think it says that Cardell Hayes has a young child. I think it says that Judge Camille Burris took great time and seriousness in looking at this matter. But am I surprised at the verdict? Manslaughter? No. Do I think it's the right verdict? Yes. Do I think he'll be successful on appeal? No.
I came into the picture the week after Cardell was convicted. I always said that I wish that every juror would have had at least maybe 3 to 4 minutes to just sit and talk to Cardell. He is not someone who would just go out and empty a clip on someone, not by any means. And you don't need but 3 minutes with him to know that he's not that person.
This is the one fact that Cardell Hayes cannot get over, and I've said this from the very, very beginning. 8 shots fired by Cardell Hayes into the back and side of Will Smith. 8 in the back.
Well, here's the deal. If you are reasonably in fear for your own life, you then have the right, according to Louisiana law, to shoot to kill. If I can shoot to kill, someone can't be 2 dead. So if I shoot once and it kills him, But I just saw, I emptied the clip because whatever reason, emotions, and you just scared and you just react. He's legally not guilty. There's several issues, in my opinion, that could be sufficient grounds to grant relief to reverse the conviction. We had a doctor report. The diagnoses on that report was accidental discharge of a firearm for Raquel. That is huge. What did transpire out there, in my opinion, involved Raquel being shot accidentally by someone other than Cardell.
The ballistics expert made it 100% clear that there was only one gun fired during this incident, that all of the bullets came from Cardell Hayes' gun.
Nothing makes sense. Gunpowder residue on Will Smith's hands. You want to know what the state's explanation for that was? Whenever he was shot, it hit him when he was in the car, and the particles could fly up in the air and land on his hands. He was shot in the back. The particles can fly up.
The gunshot residue on Will Smith's hands, it was only on the back of his hands, and it was wholly consistent with someone who had been shot numerous times at close range.
Maybe so. Maybe is that possible? They asked the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah. So yeah, that's possible. But let's be real here. Come on. He has gunpowder residue on his hands. I think that there's gonna be a lot of things that come forward that will potentially change the entire tone of the case.
I mean, I still love New Orleans. I know that New Orleans is a dangerous place. New Orleans has dangerous people. The state of Louisiana doesn't have the most strict gun laws. It's my favorite picture of us. Regardless of what happened that led up to Will dying, I think it should have been handled differently, I think. By all parties. I think it should have ended differently. Obviously, I wish it would have ended differently.
We would sit on our sofa every Sunday after church, and I would cheer the Saints on, win, lose, or draw. But now I don't even watch the NFL anymore. It's difficult. It's very difficult because I feel as though that had a lot to do with my son being where he's at today.
Unity, communication, camaraderie, brotherhood, excellence. It's so many different things that you could preach and incorporate in sports and athletics. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I'm thankful for the game. I'm thankful for everything the game has afforded me and afforded others. But at the end of the day, I see the ills of it. You see every day how power can corrupt man, not even just with sports.
New Orleans took my son from me. I mean, I wasn't out there that night, but I know my son did what he felt he had to do so he can come home.
You know, I understand that Smith, his wife, they lost their father, and I do understand that. But my son, he lost his father too.
You know, Mr. Hayes' case is important, or is seen as being important, because of the celebrity that is involved.
You couldn't tell me Will Smith would serve 25 years for killing Cardell Hayes. He's a beloved son of New Orleans. If you are a poor dude who lives in NO East and you kill a wealthy millionaire who entertained white folks for a decade and won them a Super Bowl on the backs of one of the greatest catastrophes we've seen in American history, does it matter that you killed a black man? So of course this happened to Cardell Hayes. It's happened to so many other Cardell Hayeses. So many other people have walked up those steps at 2700 Tulane Avenue have never come back down. There was nothing telling us that Cardell had a chance to be different.